Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this virtual discussion of NCI and the COVID-19 crisis. I want to start by thanking the AACR for quickly converting their traditional face-to-face annual event into a virtual one. This is allowing the sharing of new knowledge among our colleagues that's so valuable to our research community. I also want to acknowledge the heroic efforts of all in the biomedical community, the healthcare providers and biomedical researchers who are working so hard to contain the pandemic we're living through. Although they are on the front line, all of us have been directly touched by the pandemic and have tried to contribute as we're able. I think about my own family, where our contributions have ranged from my cousin in Boston, who's been working a 7-day shift in the coronavirus ICU, to my son in Brooklyn, who called his barber and volunteered to prepay for his haircuts to keep the barbershop afloat. It's all the actions, large and small, that are helping us to get through this and keep our communities together. I thank all of you for whatever you're doing, large or small. I have no financial relationships to disclose. During this talk, I'm going to discuss the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on NCI and the extramural research community. At NCI, our efforts have been focused on contributing to the COVID-19 crisis while ensuring that progress in cancer research continues. I'm going to cover 3 topics today. First, how the NCI community has pivoted some of its activities to COVID-19 research. Second, despite the pandemic, some examples of how we continue to make progress in cancer research and in patient care, which are still our top priorities. Third, the pandemic has caused an unprecedented disruption across the entire cancer research community. I'll go into some detail about how NCI has adapted its policies and procedures for both the short term and longer term to try to respond to this disruption. Starting first with NCI's contributions to the COVID-19 crisis. COVID-19 is a global public health crisis. As scientists and as human beings, we have an obligation to respond to the crisis to the extent that we're able. NCI has unique research capabilities and capacities that can be brought to bear during this crisis. We've responded by pivoting some of our cancer research activities to COVID-2. These include new clinical trials, epidemiological studies, and basic research. For example, a compassionate use protocol for tocilizumab is being initiated by the NCI. Based on the reports of cytokine storms associated with COVID-19, the ability of the anti-IL-6 receptor antibody to reduce time on ventilators and in the ICU for cancer patients will be studied. About 200 patients with respiratory compromise will be accrued to the trial. Next month, NCI will launch a longitudinal cohort of cancer patients infected with COVID-19 to be able to generate a comprehensive data set of treatments, medications, behaviors, and outcomes that will inform our understanding of risks and disease course. This study is expected to enroll well over 2,000 patients. Many of the NCI-funded centers are also developing novel therapeutic trials for cancer patients with COVID-19, as well as developing antibodies and vaccines against the virus. Vanderbilt in particular needs to be called out for galvanizing a grassroots effort among nearly now all of the cancer centers to collect clinical data on cancer patients with COVID-19. This effort, it's called the COVID-19 Cancer Consortium, will make all the data that it collects open access. In another example, the Cellular Immunotherapy Data Resource Program, which is funded through the Cancer Moonshot Immuno-Oncology Translational Network, collects patient metadata associated with cellular therapies. It's now also collecting data on COVID-19 infections and COVID-related deaths among cellular therapy recipients. NCI and NCI-funded investigators have also started novel basic and translational studies. For example, a GWAS analysis of COVID-19 patients is being undertaken to determine whether there are genetic predispositions to either susceptibility to infection or to the disease course and its severity. NCI, in collaboration with the FDA and hospitals in New York City, are collecting serum from patients to test and validate assays for the virus and for antibodies that are going to be so critical for us going forward. In an effort to develop therapeutics, NCI is also undertaking high-throughput screening of small molecule inhibitors of viral proteins that might serve as therapeutics in the future. COVID-19 patient tissues are being analyzed using the cyclic immunofluorescence platform, funded in part by the Cancer Moonshot Human Tumor Atlas Network. Finally, the interaction of COVID-2 proteins with cellular proteins in the infected cell has been assessed using the Cancer Protein-Protein Interaction Network. Beyond these efforts that I've just described, we know that many cancer researchers want to apply their creativity and expertise to meaningfully contribute to understanding COVID-19. To that end, 3 notices have already been published, 1 for administrative supplements, 1 for competitive supplements, and 1 for SBIR, STTR competitive revisions that will support new COVID-19 research efforts. In addition, to allow urgent efforts to begin, we're about to publish a notice cited here, allowing investigators to use some of their existing NCI resources on projects that can be initiated immediately. For all of these options and for more information, you should contact your program official and discuss with them how to best proceed. I want to now turn to our continuing progress in cancer research. Although NCI is responding to the COVID crisis, NCI's mission, first and foremost, is cancer research. Even during this pandemic, I would urge you to continue your research efforts to the extent possible. If you're working remotely, as so many of us are, you can analyze data, work on manuscripts, read the literature, take the time to just think, the time that we don't normally have because we're so busy in the labs. Indeed, cancer research continues across the spectrum of basic, translational, and clinical research, and we've seen progress even since the pandemic started. Here are a few examples. In the realm of clinical research, we do recognize that some institutions have been forced to stop accrual to trials. This has been pretty dramatic. There's been about a 40% drop in accrual across NCI's clinical trials. Nevertheless, other sites are managing to accrue and treat patients who need curative therapy. NCI is adapting to COVID-19 in various ways. So to allow patients on clinical trials to continue to participate in those trials, despite travel and other restrictions, NCI is adapting its way of providing care. For example, local healthcare providers can now participate in study activities under the guidance of the responsible investigators. It's now possible to ship most oral IND agents directly to patients. Nevertheless, injectable agents still must be administered at a registered site. Alternative procedures that don't compromise either the safety or the integrity of the study will be considered minor. Of course, major deviations must still be reported to the central IRB, and auditing visits are either being rescheduled or performed remotely. Finally, the central IRB is supporting remote informed consent. In the past few weeks, we've also seen the successful culmination of a number of different research efforts. For example, the first patient was recently enrolled in a study on the effect of anti-CD33 CAR T-cell therapy in children and young adults with relapsed refractory AML through a collaboration between Nirali Shah at NCI and Richard Appling at Children's Hospital in Philadelphia. As a result of a long-term study pioneered by Brigitte Wiedemann at NCI, selumetinib was approved for the treatment of children with inoperable plexiform neurofibromas. Joanne Massaguet and Dana Pear and their colleagues recently reported that the emergence of macrometastases from dormant cells is suppressed by the presence of natural killer cells that provide immune surveillance. The transition from dormancy to metastasis results from the pruning of those NK cells. In an effort funded in part through the Cancer Moonshot Humor Tumor Atlas Network program, Joe Gray and his colleagues in Oregon are monitoring tumor evolution in individual patients during the course of therapy in order to understand the mechanisms of response to therapy and the development of resistance. I want to now turn to the third topic, which is special considerations for grantees and trainees. While progress continues to be made during this time, both in cancer and in COVID-19 research, many of your institutions have suspended active non-COVID-19 research, slowing your research project. This has led to a considerable amount of stress and anxiety throughout the community about consequences to your grants and your future. For the remainder of this talk, I want to go through some of the steps that NIH and NCI have taken to address these concerns. I'll try to cover the most common questions that we hear, but I'm unlikely to answer all of them. So I would urge you to refer to the COVID-19 cancer.gov site and the NIH COVID-19 website. Of course, you can always contact us directly. We're all at work, albeit remotely. All components of the NCI are active and functioning to make sure that disruptions to the normal flow of business are kept to the minimum that's realistically possible under these conditions. In this slide, you can see NCI leadership hard at work during a recent meeting to discuss new concepts with the idea of continuing to move cancer research forward. Because all of us are working, major activities related to grants are continuing as normal. Applications are being received and being processed. Applications are being reviewed. The peer review meetings are occurring virtually. And of importance to you, of course, is that awards are being made. Although we may be able to work, we do understand that the pandemic has caused significant disruptions to your research and upended your preparations and grant submissions. We've heard many concerns and questions about the present and about the future. Please be assured that we are committed to keeping cancer research moving forward. Of course, foremost in our minds is the safety of the research staff, so our guidances are developed with that in mind. Working with NIH and the other institutes, NCI has implemented new flexibilities during this crisis that will allow research to continue and help it resume to its full level once the pandemic subsides. These include extended deadlines for applications, use of NCI grant funds for salaries and stipends, flexibility on extensions of projects and reporting requirements, extension for early stage investigators and trainees. In the next slides, I'll go through each of these bullets in a bit more detail to give you a better understanding of what flexibilities are already in place. Starting first with adjusted application deadlines, NIH will accept late applications without justification. However, note that applications that are submitted after May 1st may not be reviewed until the January 2021 round. In addition, announcements expiring within this time period will be extended for 90 days to allow delayed submissions. We've also instituted various grant flexibilities. For grant recipients whose award has not yet been made, NCI will allow pre-award costs to be incurred. Many prior approval requirements will be waived. Flexibilities regarding expenditure of funds will be allowed. Many of you are likely to have unexpected funds because of suspensions of your lab activities. NCI is going to exercise as much flexibility as possible in allowing carryover. Similarly, in awarding the budgets for your non-competitive Type 5 renewals, NCI will consider various options. For example, depending on your needs, the award may be at the full commitment level in addition to the carryover. In cases where progress was significantly limited by COVID-19, NCI will consider mid-project extensions or restructuring of the project. For all of these situations, please contact your program officer to discuss what your options are and what is allowable. Turning now to salaries and stipends. If you are a funded grantee and your institution has suspended your research activity, NIH is allowing salaries and stipends to be charged to grants. You just need to make sure that your institutional policy allows it and let NCI know that you're continuing to charge salaries and stipends. If some of your research staff are called from the lab to the clinic for work related to COVID-19, prior NIH approval is not required. I do want to emphasize, though, we have heard that a number of institutions are considering furloughing all of their research staff, whether they're supported by NIH grants or not. We would strongly urge institutions not to impede cancer research progress by taking such steps. As I mentioned a little while ago, researchers working remotely are still able to continue working by analyzing data, writing manuscripts, mentoring trainees. All of this will result in continued progress in cancer research and enable a rapid resumption of normal activities. What about reporting your progress? That's going to be an issue for many of you. Clearly, the suspension of full-time activity at institutions is causing delays in your research progress. This is likely to result in delays to the submission of your RPPRs and your financial reports. Please contact the appropriate NCI officials to let them know of the delays and to discuss how to reflect these delays in your RPPR. What about conferences and travel costs? The AACR annual meeting may be the largest in-person meeting that have been canceled, but it's not the only one. If you have non-refundable costs, such as plane tickets or hotel reservations that are associated with meetings that have been canceled, those costs may be charged to your grant. Also, if your grant supports meetings or other convening activities, those funds may be used for virtual meetings instead. As far as administrative supplements, if you have urgent or acute needs for non-COVID issues, requests for administrative supplements will be considered. But in general, you should delay requesting administrative supplements until you're able to assess the full impact of the pandemic on your research. You should also talk with your program official about what options might be available to you. All of us at NCI are particularly concerned about the impact of the pandemic on our trainees and our early stage investigators, especially our early stage investigators who've not yet applied for their first grant. The 10-year eligibility policy for early stage investigators is established by the NIH. Because of the delays caused by COVID-19, NIH is considering extending the eligibility to allow ESIs whose eligibility would have elapsed to apply. We're, of course, also concerned with our trainees, the future of our research community. So we're going to try to provide maximum flexibilities on training, specifically in the management of existing training awards to institutions, extending the awards of trainees to allow them to complete their work, extending time constraints for fellowships and other awards that have built-in transition times, awards like the K99 and the R00, or other awards that have eligibility restrictions. Accepting late applications whose delay was caused by COVID-19 will also be in effect. So in these slides, I've tried to address many of the common questions that we've heard, but there are surely many questions that remain. I'd encourage you to look at some of the websites listed here on this slide that provide detailed information on NCI and NIH policies during the pandemic. In particular, I would point out to you the COVID-19 pages at cancer.gov and nih.gov. These guidances are being updated regularly, so you should check them often. In closing, I'd again like to thank all of you for everything that you're doing during this crisis. We all look forward to the day when we can return our full attention to cancer research and meet again face to face. Until then, NCI will continue to be as flexible as possible to allow cancer research to continue. Thank you.